Good morning, everyone. How are you doing today on this lovely Monday? Come on now, you must be doing better than that. All right, good. Today we're going to explore real facts about nutrition and our history and how we have been eating all along. It is so skewed today out in the world that they're formally training our doctoral candidates bad information. And when I started to look at this a long time ago, it was not only frustrating for me, but in fact, I understood that this was harming the public globally. That worldwide, we have ideas that are completely wrong when it comes to what we should be consuming, how we should be consuming it. We get encloistered in our little cultures, our little world, be it the American culture, the European culture, the South American culture. And somehow, with our infinite inability to think, we literally believe that the world works like we see it. And there's a true history, a real history of humanity. And when we start to look at this, it liberates us to understand we can do a lot better. Not only can we do a lot better, as Stephen just mentioned, we've had a living laboratory for 63 years. We've been proving you do a lot better. Now, we're the oldest institute in the world, and we created what is today called lifestyle medicine. We created it. We founded it. There was no such thing before that. And we literally said, yes, it's nice to take medicine if you're sick, but how about if we have a lifestyle that prevents us from getting sick, prevents us from aging, and by the way, if you in fact get yourself sick and age, can you reverse it? And the answer is yes. Because what we believe in our arrogance is that humans are so intelligent we supersede nature and God. Somehow we have greater wisdom, greater understanding, greater spiritual increment than the universe has. Now, I don't think anyone listening to me would be quite that arrogant to think that that's true. And would you not think that the perfection of creation in the universe gave us everything that we needed? There ought not to be anything else that humans have to put into the fray, because everything is available that we need. And I can emphatically say, after nearly 5 decades of doing my work, yes, these things are available. But the problem is, they don't make a lot of money. And we have cultures globally today that are based upon profiteering, not upon people. Not upon the individual health of humans and humanitarian health and global health. It's about profit. You and I often have surrendered our lives to those greed mongers who literally see you as a pocketbook, a wallet, rather than a viable, living human being, an important soul, an important person. And many of you, unfortunately, allow that to happen because you don't see yourself as an important person. Oh, yes, well, I'll just go along with everything the way it is because it's more convenient. Everything I say to my family or my friends, they mock me, so I'm just going to be quiet. I know I'm at this party and I shouldn't be drinking a drink or eating a piece of cake, but I'm going to do it so I don't look odd. The best thing in the world is to look odd, to be odd, to act odd, and at the end of the day, you may be the normal one. As we've seen time and time and time and time and time again, throughout history, it's never not been the end of that story, at the end of that beautiful book, that the oddball becomes the wise woman, the wise man. I remember so many years ago, when I was just a youngster, listening to one of my mentors, Martin King. And Martin King said something that I'll never forget in my entire life, that it touched me deeply. He said, never forget the gift of life, and cherish it as you would a fine piece of china. But most of us take our lives and we crash them on the ground, and we let somebody else pick up the pieces, and then we blame them for our circumstance. How dare us do that? So today we're going to take a voyage into food as medicine. In the past I've done food is medicine for the academic community. They don't seem to read studies. They have opinions, but they don't seem to read studies. They don't seem to look at the seamless beauty and perfection of life and the universe. They seem to hypothesize things, institutionalize a hypotheses, and find out decades later that they're wrong. So let's go into this entire process here. It's just beautiful when you open up your minds and heart. So food is medicine. And let me assure you, that's the medicine that nature and the universe expected you to consume. We didn't even have a need at one point to take medicine beyond food. Because today in the 21st century, what we have learned that's locked into those foods are stunning in and of themselves. Our ancestors emerged from the continent of Africa as gatherers, not hunters. So the first challenge I have out there in the world or in the room for the so-called enlightened anthropologist is you've been wrong. You've been wrong for generations. You've been wrong for hundreds and hundreds of years. And today we have the data to prove that you've been wrong. But as we sit here in the middle of winter at the higher academic institutions globally, poor young people are given misinformation and being told that we were hunters. Now, the truth of the matter is, we have tribes that were nomadic. And what does that mean? Nomadic, moving from place to place. We just weren't content in Africa where we came out of a specific valley in Ethiopia. And Homo sapiens, our ancestors, literally started to walk out of there about 10,000 years ago. They went all over the globe, as you see in this chart, that was put together by tracing RNA and DNA of the bones of our ancestors. Now, there were different tribes, as you've heard in the past, but the tribe that came out on top were the Homo sapiens. Up until very, very recently, we actually said we never mixed with the Neanderthals. And we also incorrectly portrayed the Neanderthals as not so bright, cave-like people. Recent studies also show that Neanderthals' brain was larger than ours. So possibly they were not as foolish as we think they were, but possibly they were more loving and more compassionate than we thought. And there's two theories on how Homo sapiens took control and took over as a human race. And one theory is that we killed the Neanderthals, the Erectus, and the other tribes of people. Another one is that we outsmarted them. But looking at the circumstance we find ourselves in the beginning of the 21st century, I probably think the first is true, because we don't seem too smart at this stage. The other thing I may say to you is that we thought we never mixed with them, but about 3 to 4% of Homo sapiens genes are Neanderthal. And I do believe that that 3 or 4% account for every politician on the planet Earth today. Now here's the first honorable, respectable, really smart, forward-thinking anthropologist that went to school at a highly educating school and were taught the wrong thing, and he came out and said maybe they were wrong. And he started to do something surprisingly not long ago that no anthropologist in history ever did. Can you imagine this? They said, we're hunters. Never ever looked at teeth. Now today with photography and with technology, we can look at your teeth now. Everyone listening to me in this room and around the world, we can look at your teeth and we can determine exactly what you're eating. Isn't that extraordinary? So they started to look at teeth of pre-Homo sapiens and you, the Homo sapiens. And lo and behold, they found out that we did not even eat seeds and grains most of the time, that all we ate is green leafy vegetables and fruit. Now this is not challengeable, people. This is not challengeable. Because when you look at thousands and thousands and thousands of teeth over millennia, and you start to realize that the only time we ever eat nuts and seeds is after long-term droughts. So the anthropologists wisely started to see this 10-year period or 15-year period. We had indentations that were not there for decades or hundreds of years before. What happened? And the geologist just said, we had a drought then. Now when there's a drought, what's left of the plant? The seeds are left of the plant. So for that 5-year, 10-year, 20-year period, you see the indentations. Once the drought is over, guess what happened? All they began once again consuming is their natural food. Green leafy plants and fruits. Now those of you that have heard me lecture and read many of my books, we're telling you today in the 21st century that fruit is not a viable option for ill people. Why? There's 2 reasons. The fruit you're consuming is not from your yard or from your organic farm. It's from somewhere hundreds or thousands of miles away. So it's picked on ripened. All unripened fruit is highly acid and will rob your body, including your bones and your teeth, of minerals. It creates highly acid condition. Number 2, due to our more recent ancestors, they started to hybrid, mix one fruit with another to make them sweeter. So the average fruit today has approximately 30 times more sugar than our ancestral fruit. One small example I can give you when I spoke to the agricultural scientists is they said to me, do you like crab apples? I said, too sour. They said, crab apples are a hybrid. They're sweet compared to the original apple. Just to give you some levity on this. The third problem with this whole thing is that our digestive tract has been destroyed from eating processed sugar. Now, not too long ago, 5 generations ago, other than the incredibly wealthy people called the aristocracy, nobody ate processed sugar. Sugar, by the way, created the slave industry. Challenge anything I say. The slave industry was created for a handful of people, as always, the elite, so that they could have in their cupboards white crystal sugar that they only consumed minimal amounts of. We estimate it was about 1 kilo a year. I used to eat 1 kilo a day. 1 kilo a year. The second thing is, as we see here, Richard Leakey said, you know, if we were carnivores, and my colleague and friend Michael Clapper alluded to this briefly on the panel the other day, we would have fangs and claws. The unfortunate people who don't know much about anything say, look at the canine teeth. Have you ever seen a carnivore's teeth? If any of you have carnivore teeth here, we're going to escort you out. You don't have carnivore's teeth. They're fangs, long, sharp, razor-sharp fangs. You don't have claws. You break your nails if you sneeze. You know what claws look like in a carnivore? To rip the flesh from an animal? To put the fangs in and take it from the animal? Sadly, you don't have that. Many of you, because you're so insecure, would rather be that macho. But the fact of the matter is, you're not, you never will be, and you ought not to be consuming animals. Today we have anthropological truth. Let's give this gentleman a hand for saying, everyone in the history before is wrong, and I have proof of it. Now, how did we start eating meat, and how many people do eat meat, and why did we eat meat? Well, when our nomadic ancestors started to walk, they started to go to really odd places, like New York in the winter. And they started to say, you know, in New York in the winter, or worse, Norway in the winter, or Russia in the winter, we notice that we're starving to death. We notice that there's nothing here for us to consume. But they did watch carnivores. And the carnivores, by the way, were not only surviving, but thriving. Now, I'm completely a committed plant-based eater, and have been for a very, very long time. Haven't touched an animal-based food in 5 decades. But the fact of the matter is, if my children and my wife was starving, and if I had no other option, I'd become a meat eater. Would you? All of us would. So this is how small groups of people in northern climates at the wrong time of the year began to consume animal-based foods. I don't suggest and condone it, but the fact of the matter, I understand it. Rational people understand it. In my book, Dairy Deception, I actually point out we know the genetics. 2,000 people were starving to death in Northern Europe and started to consume the milk out of the bosoms of another species. Now think about how odd that is. All of you that say, oh, well, milk is good because Dr. Schmahook from the University of Hook said it was good. Would you get under a cow and suck from its nipple? And if you would, I completely condone what you're doing. At the same point, we will call the police and have you arrested. And I assure you, you're going to lose that court date. You say, well, Brian, why be so extreme? There's a difference between extreme and profoundly clear. Profoundly clear is not extreme. Profoundly clear is what made me start to change my attitude about things. When people get in my face and say, listen to this, would you do that? And I said, no, I'd never do that. So then why are you doing it? Because somebody milks a cow for you? By the way, it's not a person anymore. It's a machine. And they perpetually keep the poor animal pregnant. They're pregnant 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 6 days a year. And they milk the cow. And they put it in a carton. And they say nice things to you, like, if you don't drink the milk, your bones are going to crumble. No, let me reverse that. No, your bones are going to crumble if you drink the milk. Overwhelming data on that. The thing the eggheads say, most of you out there that are appalled at us telling the truth. Boy, are you appalled at us telling the truth. Challenge us. Do you have studies? We have so many studies, you'd have to retire and have 2 lives to read the studies on these things. But you don't want to read the studies. You just want to throw the studies up like you're smarter than us. Well, you're not. What's smart is nature, the universe, common sense, and what my institute has proven for 63 years with hundreds of thousands of people. That may be smart, maybe it's not smart, because we're in the process of learning more. And today in 21st century, only about 40% of the world's population primarily eat animal-based foods. You're in a minority out there. Wake up! 60% of the world's population are thriving on mostly plant-based or all plant-based diets. Well, I never knew that. They didn't tell me at the University of Stupido. We were eating plants. You want to eat plants. The only reason you don't want to eat plants, like I didn't want to eat plants, is because you never ate a plant. I didn't know what a plant was. A plant wasn't something my family ate, unless they were trying to impress the relatives during a holiday. It was impressive because the wealthy people 100 years ago and before ate meat. So it was a sign, by the way, that we have a little bit of money. We've achieved a certain level of success. So we're going to take the muscle of an animal that's called pot roast or steak, and we're going to fry it and we're going to bake it, and we're going to show you that we're also the elite. And that's how that whole nonsense happened. And if you look at the data which I have from the 19th century, the only sick people were the fat people who sat around doing nothing and eating animals. The peasants, your families, were healthy. And we created diseases over the last 100 years that never existed in the history of humanity, including type 2 diabetes, because we are plant eaters. The strongest man ever alive eats our diet. Muhammad Ali won 2 of his fights in the 1960s on the Hippocrates diet. Venus Williams, arguably the most important tennis player in history as a woman, is on our diet. Now, when are you going to wake up?
Well, I want to eat a little bit of organic chicken. Just give me a little bit, just a little tiny bit of that organic milk.
How about getting organic brain surgery? That's what we need. Get over this stuff. You say, well, you're contradicting the paleo diet, the blood type diet, the Atkins diet. I'm going to contradict a lot of things because I'm not in the business of selling you anything. I'm in the business of telling you the truth. I will never be a salesman because I probably turn more people off than I turn on. But the fact is, when I go to bed at night, I feel good. Because I'm not talking out of an academic background only. I'm talking about a mass experience and watching the results of what is not a hypothesis, but reality. Today, 6 out of 10 humans thrive primarily on plant-based diets. Are you going to join us or sit around and complain? Why do plants provide optimum nutrition? So we know that too. None of these things are found at all or in any significant amount in animal-based foods. The first are antioxidants. We learned about antioxidants back in 1954. 1954 at the University of Nebraska, an unlikely place for this to happen. Dr. Harmon came out and said, guess what? Why everyone gets sick and why everyone gets old prematurely is because you lack antioxidants. And why antioxidants protect you is because they prevent free radicals from aging you and getting you sick. Do you realize from 1954 till today, we haven't changed that idea? That's a fact? And where free radicals come from when you do bad things, like eat bad things that shouldn't be in your mouth, and don't sleep enough, and get under stress, and live in polluted areas, and wear polyester clothes, you kill cells, and what's left from the cell is electric, and those electrons start to spin wildly and systematically scavenge healthy cells throughout the body and kill them. What is an antioxidant? A nutrient from plant-based foods. The first ones they knew about were vitamin C and vitamin E. There's so many more today. CoQ10 is a great example. Alpha-lipoic acid is a great example. Amazing, amazing things that we see. And this is really a picture you may want to shoot or take this, because I search for the most appropriate way in concise method to show you what an antioxidant protects. So this is how it is. Prevents aging and disease. Where do you get it? Plant-based foods that are not cooked. Once you cook the food, the antioxidants are disturbed or gone. Oh, Brian, how could that be true? Because Dr. Smith at the University of Smithdom doesn't say that. Well, Dr. Smith isn't using common sense. You know if I cooked anything, it's not going to have the nutrients in it it should. How about if I take your brand new car and I smash it up? I have 3 or 4 accidents. Is it going to look exactly the same? Well, come on. Stretch your imagination. I know it's difficult because you're stuck on white potato fries. I get it. Peptides. How many of you know what a peptide is? One of the future treatments of medicine. That doctors are going to, legitimate doctors are going to be using this in the conquest of disease. And the preliminary work that's been done on this is no less than stunning. Stunning. These are proteins, amides, that you find within food. And when you combine these together, they activate the immune system and reverse anatomical disorder. You can use this from everything from autism to cancer, etc. The other night, if you listened to one of the panels with Thomas Seyfried, we talked about the potential, it's just the beginning stages, of using peptides in getting glutamine down, which is one of the feeders of all cancers. Do you follow? We can get the sugar away. We've been doing that at Hippocrates for over 40 years with cancer and other diseases. We take the sugar away, including fruit sugar, carrot juice, beet juice, etc. But the hardest one has been glutamine. The real killer of glutamine, reducer of glutamine, is going to be peptides. And also, you're going to see cells, stem cells used in this process. Enzymes. How many of you know what an enzyme is? Again, if you go to the university, they're going to be telling you it's only a protein. Well, that's part of the story, but not really the purpose of an enzyme. The outer shell of an enzyme, the structure of an enzyme, just like your outer shell, called your skin, is a protein. But what is that protein enzyme's real job? It's to carry electric to your electric body. If you look up the word enzyme in a dictionary, it's going to say the catalyst of all life. What does catalyst of all life mean? The switch that turns life on. Isn't that amazing when you think about it? And the only place you naturally get antioxidants, the only place you naturally get peptides, the only place you naturally get everything I'm now discussing is in raw plant-based food. They do not come in fried chicken. They do not come in yogurt. They do not come in any significant way in anything but plant-based foods. How about phytochemicals? I could spend the next 25 days from 9 in the morning till 9 at night giving conferences on phytochemicals. As a nutritional guy, I can assure you the most interesting and important thing ever discovered in the history of nutritional science, which is pretty young. Nutritional science only began in 1928 here in New York State at Cornell. There was no such thing as nutritional science until 1928. And a group of biologists and chemists got together and said, this is pretty important stuff. They only discovered the first nutrient in 1905. So by 1928, they said, this is important stuff. And the other night I said, and I'll repeat because it's worth repeating. Then we learned by the 1960s, this can reverse disease. The most important thing they ever discovered, starting in 1948, is phytochemicals. These are natural occurring elements within all raw plant-based foods that not only prevent but reverse every disease known to man. Let me repeat again to you. These are discovered in raw plant-based foods. And nature, God, the universe, put them there to prevent and reverse disease. And when people say, in one sentence, tell me why thousands and thousands of people have come to Hippocrates and successfully fought the aging process and successfully reversed catastrophic disease, it's because of phytochemicals. The data says, as all these doctors want, that, by the way, once you cook the plant above 115, all of these things are gone. The phytochemicals are gone. They're neutered. They're ineffective. So you can be a plant-based eater, and sadly, look at how many of the plant-based advocates age so prematurely, lack energy, because they don't have the medicine to prevent premature aging. It's not about taking one step more, let's get rid of animal foods and eat a bunch of cooked food. It's not about being moderate today. It's about doing what's right and going to the top of the mountain. And not saying, oh, I'm happy because I can see a little bit. I'm halfway up the mountain, I can see. You don't want to see a little bit. You want to be up the top. You want to see 360 degrees. Or don't you? You want to have a half-life? Natural occurring elements that nature, God, the universe, gave you to prevent and reverse disease. And what are you doing? Saying, this is great. This is an academic process. Quite interesting. Let's go out and eat some cooked salad. Proteins. Wow, pretty important. But boy, the meat and dairy industry railroaded all of us on that one. They're giving you absurd data, telling you need 50 grams, 60 grams, 70, 80 grams of protein. And what's happening? We have kidney disorder going through the ceiling. When I was a young man, hardly did I ever see kidney disorder. Today, it is skyrocketing to the point, in the next 50 years, listen closely, it's predicted by mainstream medicine. In the next 50 years, half the population will have kidney disorder. And I'm telling you right now why. It's animal protein, animal protein. And although veganism's going way up, we went up 1,000% last year, so is meat consumption, you're going to see. So is dairy consumption. Because we have a little bit of money, we want to show we're the elite too. And Dr. Smith from the University of Stupito told us this is good for us. Because Dr. Smith is on the payroll of the meat and dairy industry. I'm on the payroll of the human race. But sadly, you're not listening to the guy you hired. Now look at how odd this one is. When we became really odd and we thought we had to eat steak to get strong and all of this nonsense, we actually started to feed the poor steer animals. Now, like you, a steer and a cow is a plant-based eater. They are not carnivores. Have you ever seen how beautiful a steer and a cow is? Those big round eyes. They're like cool jazz musicians. And we think they're going to eat meat? Do they look like they have claws? Little round things, they couldn't hurt you. So we're feeding the meat, and we end up with something called mad cow's disease. That the proteins in their plant-based bodies literally folded and started to eat proteins and muscle. And we literally created a disorder by feeding a plant-based creature animals. And guess what? We've literally created a numerous list of disorders by feeding a plant-based creature animals. And it's a fairly recent thing that we're consuming so much animal. Because the influencers in all of the capitals of the world are not the broccoli industry, not the asparagus industry, certainly not the sprout industry. It's the meat and dairy industry. And your government here in the United States, and those of you around the world, listen to how free America is. Took 200 million of your tax dollars and gave it to the dairy industry so they could advertise to you, the American public, to consume dairy. Now, how many of you voted here to give 200 million of your tax dollars to be conned by an industry you're not supporting? Raise your hand. Oh, Brian, this couldn't be true. There's nothing I tell you that I can't prove. There's nothing I will ever say that I don't have utter experience and confidence in. There's nothing that I say that I won't debate at the greatest halls and institutions of academia anywhere on the planet Earth. And by the way, I will win the debate. Because they're coming out of the scrolls of historic nonsense. I'm coming out of common sense and experience. It's time we stand up and take our place as human beings, not as a bunch of ducks following quacks. And that's really what we're doing at this point. How important is protein? It's unbelievably important. Every cell in your body is pulled together by protein. If we took all the protein away magically, you'd melt. You'd actually fall to the ground and be a big puddle of flip. I don't know what flip is, but it looks like half fat and half protein. How about vitamins? Wow. Vitamins are great, but once you cook a food, they're pretty much gone. How do people say, well, I'm pretty healthy, I'm eating a plant-based diet, but they're still starving? Talked to somebody the other day, they said, I touch something, I don't even have to hit it, and I get wounds now. That's vitamin deficiency. So you see, when people are aging, and they start to get marks really easy on their body, that's long-term vitamin deficiencies. that are happening. And you could be eating a lot of organic plant-based things, but if they're not raw, you're not getting the vitamins from them. I said, well, Brian, that couldn't be true. There's nothing that I tell you I cannot prove to you. Now, this is not a comfortable conversation. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to wake you up. Do you follow me? And being moderate may have suited you so far, but I want it not to suit you anymore. I want you to say, wait a minute. There's possibly 1 step or 2 step or 5 step more I've got to take. Even though I'm climbing up stairs that are steep, it's worth going up those stairs. Essential elements that support tissue creation and bodily function. Vitamins. Go back again. 1954, Dr. Harmon said, what prevents you from dying and what prevents you from aging prematurely are antioxidants. First 2 he named were vitamin E and vitamin C. And there's a lot more. How many of you know vitamin D? If I had lectured to you 15 years ago, I would have taught you the wrong thing, not intentionally. Because everything I knew and everything I thought was that a vitamin D was a vitamin. And lo and behold, we found out, nope, it's a hormone, much more important. And our medical team now offers an extraordinary form of vitamin D for people in the conquest of major diseases. Because we have lots of experience with this now. And we start to know, as I wrote about in my book, Life Force, that hormones are an extraordinarily sophisticated language of communication between one cell and another cell. And if you lack vitamin D, cells cannot communicate with one another, so they tend to do things like mutate. But we can come back to that some other time. So any of a various organic substance that we call elements that are vitamins. First vitamin ever discovered, when again? 1905, vitamin B. Minerals, wow, are they important? Now, we always talk about minerals in a way that is structural, and yes, it's important for that. Your bones and your skeleton, your teeth, all of that, incredibly important for minerals. But they lie to you about those things too. I offer a highly sophisticated nutritional profile for people, and I've looked at 17,500, of which the majority, 65-70%, are women, and I found out only 1 out of 125 of you lack calcium. Calcium is not a large deficiency. But again, if you go back to the dairy industry, the moo industry as they call it, they tell you better drink lots of milk because it has calcium. And by the way, the milk in calcium is large molecule structure, cannot be digested by the human body. And if you compare it to arugula, if you know what I'm speaking about, is a weed. You can go to cold climates, tropical climates, the weed grows all over the place when it's sunny, and it has 8 times more, but it's usable calcium, gram for gram, than milk. But they don't want you to know. Free calcium. Free calcium. And by the way, arugula is great. How many of you like arugula salads? There you go. You're getting your calcium. Just eat them all the time. Now, in my presentation the other day, I explained 3.5 billion years ago, life began as we know it. And this explosion happened, and when the explosion happened, stars were created, and when stars created, the 115 elements you're looking at now started. Matter of fact, what your sun, the star, is made out of are these 115 elements. And your body, in part, is made of these 115 elements. Isn't that amazing? So you came out of nothingness and are now, along with vitamins and peptides and phytochemicals and all of these wonderful nutrients, electric charge. And your bioelectric body, your biofrequency body, requires these minerals to be the literal wiring system that carry electromagnetic frequency from one. We actually call them electrolytes inside of the cell. Now, sadly, the biologists and biochemists don't put 2 and 2 together, but why we call them electrolytes is because they propel and carry and unify electric. And if we had a magic switch and shut your electric off, immediately what would happen to you? Kaput. Finito. End of show. So we want those minerals. And one thing I can tell you by looking at people for a long time, hundreds of thousands, a lot of us lack minerals. Why? Because it's not in the soil anymore. And even most organic raw food doesn't have adequate minerals because they've been growing where? In inadequate soil. Denatured soil doesn't make natured plants. So this is why we should consider, as we teach people at Hippocrates, to take extraordinarily high nutrition, like algae, most minerals in the world. Grow plants, grow sprouts. Guess what? The sprouts you have control in your own home, in the middle of winter, in your kitchen window, using good soil that you actually compost in your backyard or in your garage, or as Ann Wigmore did in her third floor apartment in the middle of Boston, in bins. The answer is not no. The answer is yes, how can I do it? You follow me? No is a convenient way to be lazy. Nope, don't want to do it. Nope, don't want to do this. You ever notice a 2-year-old says no all the time? Guess what? 2-year-olds don't say no nearly as much as 40, 50, 60-year-olds. Most of you say no without saying no. It's about time you learn the other word, the Y word. Yes! Oh my God, now I said yes, I've got to do something. So these are incredibly important for your bioelectric wiring system, the way your mind works, your heart, your brain. You don't have minerals, you're in trouble. Carbohydrates, got a bad name. Don't want carbohydrates. You don't have carbohydrates, you'll lay around and drool. You'll have no energy. Most of our diet is carbohydrate, but it's healthy, correct carbohydrates. Not the carbohydrates I grew up on. Potatoes, pastas, breads, cakes, donuts, bagels. They're void carbohydrates. What they do is they break down to sugar, unwanted sugar. And why you get fat is that list I just went through. You get fat because you eat carbohydrates. I watched my transition out of sugar. So I gave up the obvious sugars, and then I took up eating loaves of bread. So you're like a closet sugar addict at that point. So you just have to wait 30 minutes for the sugar to really shoot up like that, right? Or let's go out to the Italian restaurant where they give you double orders of pasta and eat that. Well, what's wrong with pasta? It turns into sugar. It's denatured. It's cooked. It's cooked. And what happens when you cook something? I just went through this scenario. Every one of these elements I talk about are now not functioning in your body. Where do all of these elements come from? Raw, plant-based foods. Is there anyone that would debate this? Yes. Intellectual eggheads who don't know anything. That's who would debate this. Nobody else. And they're willing to do it, which is surprising to me sometimes. How about essential fatty acids? Didn't even know what they were till 1929. Didn't even know what they were till 1929. And they said, there's this thing that gives energy to the cells. And it was omega-6 they discovered. Well, until 1981. To me, that was like yesterday, 1981. Omega-3. And now there's a few others, but the most important two are omega-3 and omega-6. And I have concluded that they're correct now when they say, you need about 3 times more omega-3 than you need omega-6. So if you have 1 part omega-6, you need 3 parts omega-3. And the other thing, the fish industry hijacked this. I write about this in my book, Killer Fish. They saw this as an opportunity, so they jumped on the bandwagon. They said, hey, you need a fish to process the omegas before you can digest it. And all the holistic doctors who know nothing about nothing went right on that bandwagon, and they're prescribing fish oils to you. Yes, fish oil. So let's point out 2 things that I absolutely found to be factual. All fish oil causes cancer. Brian, Dr. Smith, my holistic, loyal doctor, didn't tell me that. Well, Dr. Smith ought to get off his butt and read a little bit. Because the International Organization for Omega and Oleic Acids, omega oils, have never, ever suggested fish oil is good for you. So the authorities, the world's authorities, tell you not to take fish oil. Now let's go up to the largest study that was ever done in Finland. You have this, every once in a while you have countries that really do care about the citizens in their countries. Isn't that amazing? It's rare, but there's this wonderful country called Finland. Listen, you know, we have a lot of really sick people. They're dying of heart attack, even more than America. They have more cancer, all this stuff. Let's get them on good diets and check. And they looked at the people who took fish oil and ate fish, and they had double the heart attacks and strokes. Harvard University, 2 landmark studies said the fish oil stuff is a sham. But you don't know this because your local holistic doctor who read books 32 years ago, still going along with the program there. That's what he learned when he was 30 years old, fresh out of university. Fish causes cancer. Now, when you take a fish out of the water and sit it over here on the dock for 20 or 30 minutes, how does it smell? Is it a rosy fragrance? Is it an attractive, whenever I go into a store that have a fish section, I have to run by it because it smells and it is bacteria. That's rotting flesh. No different than if I took you and put you underwater for 20 or 30 minutes and pulled you out. How do you think you'd look? You'd be rotting flesh. Anyone that would like to challenge this, let me know anywhere along the line at the end of this. And so when it is rotting, it oxidizes, and we've known for 68 years that oxidized oil causes cancer. It's called a lipid peroxide. Lipid meaning fat, peroxide. 68 years, it's in the book, nobody's ever challenged that, it's a fact. And by the way, it contributes to cardiovascular disease, as the Finns taught us. And Harvard says. And the world's authority on oil tells you. Brian, this is all new information. You're going to get new information when you have somebody that reads new things and does new things and studies new things and challenges my own ideas. You're going to get old information for people who are trying to sell you something. Because they're telling you what you want to hear. That's the oldest trick in the book. Tell people what they want to hear, you'll be rich. Could you imagine if I put this much energy in telling you to eat cupcakes? I'd be a trillionaire by now. Cupcakes are really good for you. Matter of fact, you should not only eat cupcakes, but put them in a blender, blend them up, and implant cupcakes. Cupcake face cream. You can blend them up and put face cream cupcakes on. Whoa, popular overnight. Everyone will be eating cupcakes, and I'll be on all the talk shows talking about the cupcake diet. We should laugh because that's how sad we are. Another primary fuel for the body and brain. You don't have enough essential fats, your brain's going to go south. One of the pillars of why we get dementia and Alzheimer's today is we lack essential fats in the brain. And one of the reasons I think an incredibly important supplement to take is algae. Both green, blue-green, and phytoplankton, all three I should say, literally have the same exact fat the brain's made of. So if you don't want to lose your memory, you want to retain memory, and you want to be vigorous at 100, you better start getting fat in your brain. So I always joke about this. When I was a kid, we'd insult people by saying they're fatheads. We should actually be complimented by saying, the more fat you have in your brain, the smarter you probably are. Isn't that funny? People have been using adaptogens. How many of you have ever heard the word adaptogens? Wow, amazing stuff. So another proof as medicine, adaptogens. So the Russians said, we want better athletes. We want better workers. So let's now see if traditional medicine can give us that. So they sent the biggest brains, the smartest people, out to eastern Russia, where the more indigenous Russian people were. And they said, well, shouldn't we make some chemical batch over here to make our athletes better, stronger, faster? And they said, no, we know how to do that with plants. And they started a long time ago, nearly 100 years ago, looking at adaptogens. And there were lots of questions of why the Russians were so unbelievably good in Olympic Games. Now, they weren't telling you, and by the way, it's still not against the rules, that they were taking superior plants. Primal plants, as we call them, PPs. Primal plants. And these have been around for about 2,500 years. One of the products that I take every single day now is based upon adaptogens, and now we combine it with CBD oil, and it amplifies the benefit by 100 to 200 times. Adaptogens. So if you are interested in brain and body energy, beyond the normal that I'm speaking about, why Yugen is a state of the art, and you're going to see why in just a minute. So adaptogens are uniquely classed as healing plants. They help balance, restore, and protect the body. They don't force the body in any particular way, like an herb will. When I'm taking an herb, the intent of taking the chemistry from an herb is to dramatically shift the chemistry, the negative chemistry of a disorder. An adaptogen supports it. So for instance, if you have high blood pressure, it helps it to become low. If you have low blood pressure, it helps it to become normalized. And you say, well, gee, plants are that smart? The amazing part is humans are not that smart. We don't know how to do it. Of course plants are that smart, because the universe has everything in it that we need. For example, if an adaptogen wants to put your blood pressure down, it will do it. Wants to put it up, it will do it. Now, how long have we been researching this? For a century. How much proof is there? Thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of studies. And sadly, the Russians kept this close to chest for good reason. This gave them advantage. These substances help the body to adapt to change in the environment. Why do you think they were in eastern Russia? Boy, you want to be in a bad environment. In the middle of summer there, it's 60 degrees. And starting in September, it's probably 30 degrees. This is a rugged, hard place to live. And so, indigenously, over thousands of years, they figured this out. How do we live in the cold? How does our circulation go? And they didn't have pharmacies, and they didn't have allopathic doctors, but they had nature. So then they have Bruckmann, smart young guy, gets out of school at the beginning of the 20th century, and they say, we want you to go over there and study with the top people we have in eastern Russia, and he literally becomes the world's authority on this stuff, on adaptogens. And years ago it was presented to America, but it was too much money and the company wasn't that great at marketing, so it sort of became a flash-in-the-pan fad, and only the elite athletes kept it up. So Americans started to have that advantage, Europeans started to have that advantage, etc. So in 1921, this is when this whole thing began with Bruckmann, and he became the world's leading authority on this. He's inspired and guided by Lazarevin. And Lazarevin was his mentor and his teacher. So these are names that you should remember, because these are some of the godfathers of plant science. Now, one of my friends and colleagues who I work with consistently, he helps his degrees, 2 Ph.D.s in advanced biology. When I'm reformulating and improving the life-give supplements that we offer, he's a guy I trust. He works with the NIH, the CDC, and when there's any problems like the E. coli outbreak, he's the guy they call in. Because he understands you can't just throw antibiotics at things like that. You've got to boost the body with plants. So he understands the botany as well as the biochemistry of things. And his name is Marc Premier. So Marc, back I think in 1989 or 1990, was at a conference, and he has one of those unique brains that is not only academically advanced, but open. That's usually an oxymoron. Usually they're academically advanced and closed. It's very rare to find academically advanced and open. Because once they know a lot, they spend the rest of their life using that as a credential. You follow that? He says, I know a lot, but not enough. So he happens to meet Breckerman, and he goes completely bonkers. He says, my God, you mean to tell me that there's plant medicine that's stronger than any other medicine, and you have 100 years of research on this stuff? So he took the mantle, and now here in North American, Premier is a leading authority on this, and helped to formulate, again, the adaptogen formula, and he's also an international leader in CBD oil, now, which I take every day, as I did here at the hotel this morning before I came. Now, here are just a few. I want you to look at them, adaptogens. There's many more than this, but these are not the average plants that you go to your health store and get. And by the way, if you don't treat them correctly, when you're making these herbs, if you cook them, heat them, process them, chemicalize them, preserve them, the adaptogenic effect is gone. So you have to know how to dry these either in the sun at a very, very low temperature before you can even process them. What's the best way to get these adaptogens? Go out into the field and eat them. But sadly, most of us here are restricted in our lifestyles listening today, and we can't go out in the field and get these. Be far better for you. So you have to rely on ethical people. That's sort of an oxymoron too. Ethical people to do this and to have your interest at hand. You know, it's amazing. People are willing to ask you for copious amounts of money, but they're not willing to do the work with integrity. Isn't that sad? Give me money and I'll give you a half-baked product. And by the way, it's short-sighted because if you give somebody a product that really doesn't work in the long run, they're not going to buy the product again. You follow? Wouldn't it be better to make a product that way? They say, wow, that's just amazing. When I started to take these things, my energy went up 25, 30%. When I'm doing my fourth lecture at 11 o'clock at night sometimes, it makes me be able to be lucid the last 2 hours. So now we have another area that's now becoming extraordinarily important to the future of healthcare and medicine, the cannabinoid receptor sites. 1961 in Israel. 1961 in Israel. At Hebrew University in Jerusalem. These guys said, hey, in your body you have little receivers of data and information that are fed by certain elements and nutrients that literally switch health on and off. And it was incredibly correct and respectable research. But nobody wanted to talk about that because back in the beginning of the 20th century, they made a long-time herb called cannabis illegal. So in the 1920s, they said, this is a drug, it's bad for you, you're going to go crazy, don't touch it. And little did I know until recently that doctors used to prescribe CBD oil all the time. All the time. It was a common medicine that they used. Now we speed up to the beginning of the 21st century, and we see what's happened. Now, most of it's for profit, and most of it's nonsense. But when I really want to learn about something, I go to the top people in the world. So I did. So back in June, I went and I spent a day at the Agricultural Science Center in Israel. You may want to jot her name down. Most important researcher in the world today is also Israeli, Nurit Bernstein. Nurit Bernstein showed me a product that the Israeli government supported making that reverses brain tumors with cannabinoid receptor site oil called CBD oil. It will be on the market very soon. I brought Dr. Jacobus into the Institute. He spent a few days with us teaching our medical team. Dr. Jacobus is European, works at the University of Houston, and is one of the leading authorities in the world on CBD oil. He said, this is a work in progress, as did Nurit Bernstein. And by the way, The more work we do on this, the more exciting it is. And thank God of what happened in 1961 with Makalu at the university in Jerusalem. I will tell you loud and clear, this is going to be one of the most important medical findings in the history of medicine. We've been using this at Hippocrates for 6 or 7 years. We bring in the Rolls-Royce product from Europe. Matter of fact, the EU certified it as the cleanest CBD oil. They don't even use machines. They press it manually by hand. And the top we were able to find here. And when you start to look, as we have done clinically, at what this does for people, it's outstanding. Now, I want to preface all of this by saying what you may read on the internet could be right, but probably is not right. Joe Smith, I took it and my tumors fell out. Now, here's what the world's leading authorities say, and I concur with this. That this is because, being a work in progress, we don't really know which oil and which breed and which species works best with which disorder. But now, with the waterways being opened for this, research is commencing. I predict over the next 5 to 10 years, we will be able to say that this particular original species, that's difficult to find, because since 1920, all of the hemp that's been grown has been grown to have higher THC, to get you loaded, to get you high. You follow? So they're having a difficult time finding the original plants. But once they find the original species of plants, we will be able to categorically say to you, this is the best one for this particular disorder. Now, when you mix this with adaptogens, again, it's a minimum of 100 times better to 150 times better. Some say 200. I'll be conservative and say 150 times better. And New Yugen is the only company in the history of man that has done this. And it's headed by who? Marc Premier, the most important chemist alive today on plants. None of these essential nutrients exist in usable forms in the flesh of animals or their milk from the bosoms of other species. The real science is plant science, not animal husbandry. It is outrageous that we take up most of the good land in the world to raise animals to eat for 40% of the world's population and destroy the environment of the planet Earth at the same time. Shame on us, shame on you, and there's no such thing, I'll be loud and clear, as organic meat. That's a lie with a big L. Read my books, Poison Poultry, Dairy Deception, Killer Fish. Read them. That is all referenced with factual science. This is what really it looks like there. And I'm giving you homework, which I gave the other night, but there's new people possibly listening. Right now, for free on YouTube, you can watch a movie I petition you to watch called Dominion. Dominion. Here in this free country we live in most of the European countries and in Canada, it's against the law to film in a factory farm. It's a felony. So if you and I jump over the fence in a factory farm in the United States, most of Europe and Canada, they could put us in jail for 10 years. In Australia, they don't have that unbelievably Nazi-like law. So they filmed factory farms. And they did a brilliant job, and they got great filmmakers, and they have great commentary on it. Dominion. Watch Dominion. Americans eat more meat per capita than any other people on the planet because we're number one. Not only are we number one in eating meat and animal foods, we're number one on taking pharmaceutical drugs. We have 4% of the world's population. We consume 50% of the pharmaceutical drugs. Let me once again repeat to you, free Americans. 4% of the world's global population, 50% of the pharmaceutical drugs, because we are free-thinking, liberated, progressive people. And God forbid you get to the ripe old age as Brian Clement, because my age group, 95% of us take medicine, and the average is 5 medicines. Only 5% of us do not take medicine. Somehow they've convinced you medicine is part of the master plan. Congratulations for being open-minded, free-thinking people. Oh, I can't eat that way. I better check with my doctor to see if he says it. I can't take that food-based supplement. I better check with my doctor. Who are you? Oh, I'm macho. Animal food production is the world's leading cause of environmental collapse. Period. Yes, I have an electric car. Some of you progressive people have Priuses. But if you have a Prius and you're eating free-range eggs and chicken, you're part of the problem. You're fooling yourself, not me, and no thinking person. I care about my children and grandchildren, do you? And stop chewing on fish. Ancient cultures understood the principles that life force within foods could maintain human health and even restore it. They didn't have any other option. They basically said, hey, grandmom taught me that, great-grandmom did that, everyone did that, because who the healers were the women. Why? Because women have a higher ability for empathy and compassion and maternalism. And so, of course, the woman should be the healer. But again, once it became a profit-based profession, we phased the women out. And I'm proud to say now that half the women going to medical school, half the people going to medical school are women. So that's it. So now the next step is we've got to teach them something that works. That's it. So this is wheatgrass juice, which we're known for. We didn't come up with wheatgrass juice. It's talked about thousands of years ago. And so wheatgrass juice is so amazingly powerful. Yesterday we went into New York City on the train. We came out of the Long Island Railway and we instantly saw we could buy wheatgrass juice and green juice, and we drank them. In Penn Station.
Oh, this is hard to do.
No, it's not. No, it's not. This is easy to do. But you find your way to Dunkin' Donuts.
They do have organic coffee.
Wake the hell up. See that? I want you to look at it once again. This was an exciting thing in my mind at one point. The best part of that is right in the middle, the hole. Now, I recall on numerous occasions going to the bakery. In cold parts of the year, on Sunday morning, my family would sit outside shivering with smoke coming out of our nose to get into the bakery, because people stood in line to get into the bakeries. It's not a joke. Back in those days, we had Dunkin' Donuts. They actually would deliver at that point. They would come with a delivery truck to your house. You didn't even have to leave the house. And we would get a dozen donuts. And we'd think it was for the family. My grandfather and I, by the time we got home, polished off all the dozen donuts. And I remember my grandmother and mother saying, "Where are the donuts?" "Oh, we stood in line, but there was no way to get in." Lack of nutrients from food precipitate disease. Don't you get it? If I, by the way, say, I'm going to spend $10 million building a house right here in Long Island on the ocean, it's going to be the best view in Long Island, and as I'm building the house and putting $10 million into the house, I forget to put a frame in the house. So we all move in, we come with our Bentleys, our Rolls Royces, we move into the house, and we're laying there the first night, and the house collapses because it doesn't have nutrients in it. Darwin said it correctly, survival of the fittest. The weak will perish, biblically. Weak means starvation. Weak means weak cells. Weak cells mean weak bones, weak organs, weak brain. You will perish. You're going to eat a donut, eat the hole in the middle. That's the only part that you want. Now let's talk about the history of us discovering that food reversed disease. So back in the 1700s, there was this really smart surgeon, Lind, and Lind was a Scottish guy. Now, when I was studying this for my book, Killer Fish, and also Supplements Exposed, I was stunned to find out the only people that ever made money hundreds of years ago were sailors. And you know why they made money? Because 50% of them would always die on long voyages. So when the wife and the children lined up and the sailor was going on to the ship, and they said goodbye, it was really goodbye for 50% of them. Now, this wonderful surgeon starts to notice, hey, where's Joe? Where's Harry? Where's Charlie? Oh, they're dead. We had to throw them over the side. And he starts thinking about it. Remember, hundreds and hundreds, nobody ever thought about it. Probably the Vikings never thought about it. They were Swedish. But he starts thinking about it. And he says, you know, what I notice is every once in a while we go to these tropical ports, and when the guys get back on the boat after they've eaten citrus, nobody dies at that point. So this is a pretty easy next step. He says, maybe it's citrus that does it. Now, nobody knew what nutrition was. Remember, nutritional science didn't happen until when? 1928. We're talking about 1747 here. So he basically says, limes. Limes are the best. And limes are not that perishable. I can actually put baskets of limes on the ships, and people can take these months-long voyages and nobody's going to die. And this is where the English got the nickname limeys. Because when they would come into port, they'd smell like limes, but they were the only sailors not dying. Isn't that amazing? So we wiped out scurvy by realizing what we now call vitamin C. We didn't know it was a vitamin C. We didn't really discover vitamin C till the 20th century. It was in citrus. Thyroid disease and disorder. Wow, what a plague this is. And thank God on the panel we had last night on electromagnetic radiation, it was brought up briefly, but I'll expound on that now. Why today we've gone from 20% 25 years ago of women having thyroid problems in their life. A generation ago, 25 years, 20% of women had thyroid problems, to 70% of women having thyroid problems now, is cell phones. You take this abnormal frequency and stick it right on your thyroid and brain, and it vibrates the endocrine system. Thyroid is part of the endocrine system. And the more you do that, the higher the incidence of thyroid problems, including thyroid cancer. Low and high thyroid. Hashimoto. And men, which were so negligible, I hardly ever saw a man 25 years ago with a thyroid problem. 20% of us have thyroid problems now. Now, yes, it's other deficiencies. So the two nutrients that are absolutely essential, meaning you have to have them for the thyroid to function, are selenium and iodine. Even here where we're holding the conference this year in Long Island, which was a farming community, when my family in the 1920s owned a little cottage here on the water, this was all farms. Boy, they should have held on to that cottage. But the reality, quite simple, is we farmed out the iodine. So in general, iodine in our soil only was near oceans, period. The Midwest, which is called the bread belt, literally never had iodine in it. So New England, Central, East, California, has been gone for about 150 years. Selenium, about 100 years. And again, selenium and iodine lack is going to create weakened thyroid. So when we are helping people who have these problems, or helping you to prevent these problems, you don't have to wait till you have a problem, by the way. Isn't that an interesting thought? How about preventing the problem? We create nutrients, ionic nutrients, not typical iodine, no. Ionic meaning what you would find in a plant, electrically charged iodine, and we give it to people. Dr. Marshall, God bless his soul, he and I, 20 years ago, created a supplement called Pinnacle that prevents degradation of the thyroid. And by the way, if you happen to work in front of computers, you better all do these things. Period. If you happen to be nutty and keep using your cell phone in that way and not away from you, you better do these things. And if you happen to live in a city, by the way, that everyone's using cell phones, you may not even own one, you better do these things. Because again, we went from 20% to 70%, almost nothing to 20%, and now I predict in another generation it will be over 90% of people will have thyroid problems who are female. How about rickets? Rickets is notably a vitamin what deficiency? And what kind of mineral? Calcium. And what we now understand only in the last 10 years is that if you have long-term lack of vitamin D, even if you have adequate calcium in your body, it doesn't work. And if you have adequate calcium in your body and a lack of vitamin D, it doesn't work. The same happens reversing. It's inverse too. Now, where do you get calcium? Well, it can be free. Starts with an A. The Italians and the French eat a lot of it, called arugula. And yes, we make the only plant-based calcium supplement I know of on the planet. And yes, you can buy that if you want it to be easy. But by the way, if you're taking a lot of green leafy vegetables, you're going to get all the calcium you need. And we're suggesting that's what you should be eating today. And rickets are still happening worldwide. They found in Japan, as an example, kids who eat high starchy carbohydrates diet, non-nutritive carbohydrates, in their teens have this problem. In their teens have this problem. Beriberi. Another problem Japanese kids have who are on polished rice, non-nutritive carbohydrates. Beriberi was why we discovered vitamins. William Fletcher, London, England, said we've got to wipe out this catastrophic problem. People were dying by the thousands from beriberi. Discovered vitamin B in food, gave it to them, wiped out beriberi. So, do we have a long scientific history of knowing that nutrition reverses disease? Yes. How come your doctors don't know this? There's no money in me telling you to eat food. We're not in the food business, we're in the health business. We're in sustained profit business. Do you follow me? There's nothing to do with health. So now Linus Pauling shows up. Linus Pauling, pretty smart guy. 1968 says every single disease is linked to nutritional deficiency. Amen, end of story. That's like God coming out and saying, everyone should eat plants. Goes back in. Linus Pauling. How come we didn't hear him? How come we didn't know about the surgeon Lind in 1747? How come we didn't know about William Fletcher in 1905? How come we don't know we reverse all of these catastrophic diseases? How come we don't know that Hippocrates Health Institute helps people reverse cancer? Helps people reverse multiple sclerosis? Easy things like diabetic type 2. You come to us, do what we say, you will reverse diabetic type 2 conditions. Not possibly, not maybe. It's not like it's going to be a chance if you do it. If you do what we say, you will do it. Cardiovascular disease, almost every one of you will reverse. You have to be pretty sick, almost ready to die, not to reverse that one. You say, well, Brian, if this is true, how come everyone doesn't come to you? Because, unfortunately, we tell you to do the work. You don't want to come to us, because we tell you we can't heal you. We're not in the business of magic, like medicine and healthcare, including natural medicine and healthcare is. We're not liars. We don't want to lie. We don't have to lie. We say, you have to do it. Nobody wants to do it. Give me a pill. Give me magic. Pretty sad. This chart shows it as it is. At the very bottom, where they don't have colorectal cancer, they eat plant-based diets. At the very top, they eat the most animal-based foods, colorectal cancer. Even the World Health Organization had to step in when they were suppressing, in the United States and all over the world, governments were suppressing, that, by the way, if you ate 2 pieces of bacon a week, you'd have an 18% higher chance of colorectal cancer. I never ate 2 pieces of bacon, period. I ate the entire package of bacon every day. What the hell you mean 2 pieces? 2 pieces give you an 18% higher incidence of colorectal cancer? How many of you ever stopped at 2 pieces of bacon here? Raise your hand. You follow what I'm saying to you? And forget the bacon, then you'd fly the bologna and the salami and the kielbasa, and you'd put it in butter. He said, well, that's what my grandmother did. God bless her soul. We know that things like magnesium from plants and B6, at the bottom they're getting those. They're getting B vitamins, they're getting magnesium. They're eating garlic, that, by the way, is an antimicrobial, anti-cancer agent. You know how cheap, raw, organic garlic is? The Italians know this, but sadly they saute it. Oh, it doesn't taste good till I saute it. Don't saute it. Eat it raw. You know how much arthritis in this country? It's over this now. This is a couple of years ago's statistic. It costs $304 billion a year. And they're debating about the budget. How about if we could save $304 billion a year just in the United States, by abandoning the disease we call arthritis. When I met my wife in 1978, she was directing the world's most famous center, period, that was reversing arthritic conditions. Unlike here in the United States, where we've always been the enemy, because your Food and Drug Administration are the marketing wing for the pharmaceutical companies. They work for the pharmaceutical companies. They don't work for you. Matter of fact, to get a job in the FDA, prerequisite, you have to be somebody who worked with the pharmaceutical industry. And when you leave the FDA, you'll go to the pharmaceutical. So if you pass the bills, you make the laws happen, you'll get a big job in the pharmaceutical. In her country, shockingly, the government came in and did research at her center, spent over $2 million, and started to send Swedish citizens to her center because their statement was, it works and it saves money. Isn't that refreshing? Let's give them a hand. There's somebody with common sense. No pain, no suffering, no decrepit, no, my God, I have to walk on a walker, I have to be in a wheelchair, I'm in constant utter pain, I've got to be on OxyContin, I've got to be on oxycodone, none of that nonsense. Let's get better. Whoa. And they showed over 90% of the people that went on the plant-based diet and the short fast that her center put people on reversed inflammatory arthritic conditions. Well, Brian, if this was true, we wouldn't do it. Problem there is, too, they told them they had to do it. Isn't that odd? They didn't have a magic pill. They didn't have a magic pill and say, you don't have to change anything. Just keep eating your free-range eggs, your organic cheese, your wild game. They didn't say that. They said you have to get rid of that nonsense. You have to eat plants that have phytochemicals in it, that have all these extraordinary elements that nature, God, and the universe gave you, and people got better. I know this is too much of an effort. I know this is too early on a Monday to be posing truth to you. It's difficult. I know it's difficult. So you're going to say, well, that's extreme. What's extreme is the way you live. What's extreme is how everybody sitting here thinking this is extreme is. That you're extremely out of touch with reality. You're extremely sabotaging your life. And you're part of the problem. The real interest for Anna Marie and I to direct and run Hippocrates Health Institute is to show viable, walking, living examples of what people are capable of once they choose to be people. So when people get well from a disease, exciting to us, because there at least you have one normal person who did what they were supposed to do. Now, what we'd like to do is build an army of normal people doing what they're supposed to do. But it's sort of hard to get you enlisted in this army of take care of myself. If it was easier, walked out of the train, got wheatgrass and a green drink at Penn Station. What could be easier? They brought it on the train for us? More of you asked for it, it would be on the train, I can tell you. $140 billion a year for medical costs, $164 billion from lost wages, because a poor person's that pain cripple and the whole family doesn't know what to do, because poor Mary's crying half the day and doped up on OxyContin, which we knew in the year 1900 was more addictive than heroin, but in the 1970s, let the bastards put it back on the market again. Go back again. We knew it was more addictive than heroin in 1900, but allowed them to bring it back in the market in 1970. And the drug problem that we're stopping the people at the border should be stopping people in Connecticut, where they make OxyContin. Look at skin cancer going up. More meat, more dairy, more eggs, more skin cancer. Because locked in the cells of that non-food are deadly chemicals. Heavy metals love fat. And I have a hypothesis on that. I'm not sure I'm right, so I won't share it with you. But they love fat. They don't like oxygen. They don't like to be oxidized. They're metal. They're heavy metal. So they get deep into the fat of the body. So the heavier you are, and I was pretty heavy at one point, you have more heavy metals, more chemicals, and then those heavy metals and chemicals come out when you're in the sun, and they come out on the skin, and the skin becomes a frying pan, and lo and behold, you get skin cancer. Now, if the sun created skin cancer like they proposed to you, the whole African population would be wiped out. The whole indigenous population of Central and South America would be wiped out. And when I look at the data, they don't have any higher skin cancer today than they had 50 years ago in the true indigenous tribes. Whereas in the United States, the African American population per capita has more skin cancer than the white population, because they're not on an African diet. Whoa, is that a true statistic? Once again, I'll repeat. There's nothing I will ever tell you I can't prove to you. That's a true statistic. Look at Alzheimer's disease. 2005. Look at 2050. 3 things cause Alzheimer's disease. One I mentioned, so we won't labor over it. Lack of fat in the brain, essential fatty acids. Best source, algae, sprouts. All plants have essential fats in it. Not fish. Unless you want cancer, more heart disease, eat fish. Great thing for you. Take fish oil. And by the way, we're going to go up 3-4 times, is because we lack B12. 70% of the population lack B12. And even my colleagues here are shrinking flowers. If you're a vegan, take B12. Well, they ought to do the research I've done. 32 years I've been doing research. Meat, dairy, fish eaters have an 8% higher incidence of B12 deficiency than vegans do. But you need to take a supplement. We all concur on that. We happen to make one that works. It's a food-based living supplement, because B12 is not a B vitamin. It's a soil-based microorganism. So every day, the only supplement I say you better take is B12, unless you want to be part of this illustrious group of people who don't know who you are. And many of you have such miserable lives because you're not willing to take responsibility. Maybe you want to have Alzheimer's disease because you don't want to know who you are. You don't want to say, well, God, if you know who you are, you're going to say, oh, I'm pissed off. Look at that. Number 3 is Anna Maria, 25 years ago, began to call it stage 3 diabetes. The insulin pump within your brain doesn't have the ability to function when you have too much sugar in it. And one of the things that go right through the blood-brain barrier easily is sugar, including fruit sugar. So you want to prevent dementia and Alzheimer's. You get rid of the sugar. You start taking biologically living forms of B12, like the Life Give product. You also then get enough essential fats, And lastly, and as important, if not even more important, use your brain. Now there's something called luminosity. Used to be crossword puzzles. Brain researchers, brain scientists put together programs to exercise the brain. That's what you want to do. Look at meat consumption. The bottom, 1961, 2013. That's worldwide. Look at meat consumption, 1961, 2014. Central America is at the top, North America second, Caribbean, South America, etc. High animal protein intake was positively associated with cancers. That comes out of JAMA, Journal of American Medical Association. So even the mainstream guys who always hide the truth is slipping into the literature now. The solutions. Solutions are pretty simple. How many of you want solutions? Anyone want solutions? Raise your hand. I'm looking out there around the world. Are you sitting on your couch? Raise your hand. Look at that guy. Eliminate red meat, chicken, turkey, pork, wild game, fish, including shellfish, all aquatic life, milk, butter, cheese, yogurt, kefir, eggs. First step. Eliminate them.
Well, where am I going to get my protein?
You want to rerun this? The good news is he films this stuff. You can watch it 30 times. Number 2, increase organic, raw, plant-based foods. Heavily rely on greens and sprouts and low-sugar vegetables. Don't say, I eat a lot of vegetables or beets and carrot juice. Beet and carrot juice has astronomically high amounts of sugar in it. That's why you like it? Well, Dr. Walker 80 years ago said, we've learned a lot in 80 years. If Brian Clement comes back in 2 years and tells you the same thing, stop listening to Brian Clement. Do you follow me? Take clover sprouts, broccoli sprouts, cabbage sprouts, buckwheat, leafy greens, collard, mustard, kale, arugula, purslane, free again, matcha, cucumbers, celery, summer squash, turnips. When I was a kid, everyone ate turnips. What happened to turnips? They went out of style. They're incredibly good for you. Fermented cabbage and vegetables, onions and garlic, medicines, antimicrobial, antifungal, antiparasitic. When in the conquest of disease, aspire to consume 100% uncooked living cuisine. When you're not sick, make sure at least 75% by weight of your diet is uncooked, organic, raw cuisine. Easy to do. Even if you continue to eat 3 meals a day, which I discourage, basically what you do is have a large green juice, weighs a pound, a moderate green salad, weighs a half a pound. Now you're 1.5 pounds of raw food, and take 1/4 pound of quinoa, or cooked beans, sprouted and then cooked beans. And that's how you get filled up. When I eat cooked food, that's what I do. You follow? And easy stuff. Oh, I'm going to die. I've got to eat all this raw food. No, you're going to die if you don't eat raw food. So here's the Hippocrates food pyramid. We got tired of all the nonsense the government puts out. So now, let's start at the bottom. Freshwater algae. Why? They were the very first life form on the planet. Algae of all types, sea algae, phytoplanktons, etc. One of the life gift products. Seaweeds, arami, dulse, hiziki. Sprouted nuts, seeds, and grains, fruits and vegetables, nuts and seeds, juices, herbs, microgreens. This is the most nutritious, the highest protein, highest vitamins, highest minerals, highest essential fats, highest phytochemicals, highest peptides are in these raw organic foods. Now, if you care to eat small amounts of cooked food because it's your security blanket, that's perfectly fine. But don't overindulge with them. So now we're going to take you down on a trip.
Health Institute. For over 60 years, this alternative holistic teaching institute continues to empower people from all over the world to decrease their toxic load and reclaim their health. The best approach to healing is one that is personalized, comprehensive, guided, and addresses who you are as a whole person, mind, body, and spirit. Our signature life transformation program is a 3-week, fully immersive protocol and has been curated specifically to accelerate detoxification, reverse nutritional deficiencies, and promote inner healing. The program starts with a complete health evaluation, inclusive of blood draws and energy feedback analysis, to identify and highlight your specific health challenges and recommend the optimal supplement and lifestyle plan for you. Medical supervision is provided throughout your stay to ensure you are fully supported. Upon arrival, you'll be guided on a tour of the property, along with the other guests that arrive that day. You will enjoy our fresh-pressed green juices made daily and learn about the incredible benefits of our world-renowned wheatgrass and protein-rich algae. Wheatgrass and algae are 2 of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, both containing more nutrients per calorie than any other food. You will indulge in our amazing organic, raw vegan cuisine. This mineral-rich diet will help accelerate your healing. Revitalize your cells with our latest energy and healing technologies that support the nervous system and promote inner healing. H-Wave, Nucom, OnDemed, MRS Cyberscan, Theragem, Vio4, Turbosonic, and so much more. You will also experience psychotherapy and group sessions to share your story and find the support you need. Colonics will help cleanse your colon and optimize your digestive system. Yoga and Qigong for spiritual and physical balance. And spoil yourself in our organic salon and spa. Attend our cutting-edge health lectures. Relax in our sea salt mineral pool. Detoxify your heavy metals in our infrared or steam saunas. Participate in our unique exercise classes such as rebounding, aqua fitness, Swiss balls, Latin dance, and so much more. Connect with others on your wellness journey and build friendships that last a lifetime. All of this and more, located on 55 beautiful acres in West Palm Beach, Florida. Are you ready for your life transformation?
So before I get on a plane and leave, I want to once again thank Stephen for his year-long effort to put this conference together and to enlighten those of you sitting in the auditorium with us as well as globally. And we're on a march, I'm right at Stephen's side, to change humanity. So we invite you to join us. God bless, be well.